Welcome to the Roundtable, a podcast of Lakeside Church. We hope today's discussion leaves you encouraged. For more information on how to connect, please visit our website, lakesidechurch.ca.
Well, welcome to episode number 4 of the Roundtable podcast. This week we have all 4 members of our teaching team. I don't know how often we're going to get all 4 of our schedules to line up, but it did this week. So welcome Robyn, Jeff, Daniel, and myself, Marc. I'm here as well. And we're just so excited for the conversation and the way we've been able to dialogue with so many Lakesiders. And it's been so good. And today we're going to jump into the questions in just a minute. But guys, we're in week 94 of this COVID. Does it feel that way?
Yeah.
My wife cut my hair yesterday. What do you think?
Excellent.
Nice fade.
I love it.
This is literally like her first time. Robyn, you cut your husband's hair. How did that go?
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah. Just thinking you'll stop going to the barber and.
Okay, this is like that's your house, not like some motel where you're staying now because your marriage is on the rocks, right? And is Daniel, your hair, you're cutting it yourself?
I cut it myself.
Jeff, what? I mean, you're like Archie, man.
No,
that thing's just going to get more and more.
This is, I need a haircut.
Yeah, or just more pomade. You just keep. So guys, here's what I have to tell you. Last night, Trevina and I had a deal. If she cut my hair, I was going to pluck her eyebrows.
Uh-oh.
Now, you need to know how precious her eyebrows are to her. And
I've heard.
You've heard? Oh yeah. She has a very special
always
relationship.
Brianna.
Yeah, with Seema. And Seema you can't get to Seema right now. And so she entrusted me. And do you want to hear what happened? This isn't posted on the internet, but I can tell you guys because this is a private conversation that's not going anywhere. As I was plucking, I accidentally grabbed the top part of her eyelid, and guys, I took out a chunk of flesh.
Oh no!
I'm not even kidding. I'm still in my house. She loves me, but gosh,
You shouldn't admit to that.
Yeah, that's a whole
still in the
sermon on.
house.
If you needed a sermon analogy on grace, just walk through that encounter.
Or revenge. She hasn't cut your hair for the second time yet. I'd be a little nervous if I were you.
Yeah, so now not only are her eyebrows not done, but now she's missing a chunk of skin as well. So anyways, welcome to round 4 of the Roundtable discussion. And if you were with us this past weekend, we're going to be dissecting all the questions that came in had to do with Robyn's message this weekend, which is part of our Scandalous series. And can I just go over the 4 one-liners that you dropped that I just thought were so good? I was watching on Facebook, and you can just see the interaction and the deep resonance from our community with some of these statements that I just thought were so good. Number 1, the Jesus way and the church's way is countercultural to any and all other societies. Love that. This one got hammered home a lot. I loved it as well. Jesus followers resemble Jesus. Here's one that probably rubbed people the wrong way, and it probably did when Jesus lived this way too. Losing is winning. I love Jeff's comments on that on the Monday 5 this week. If you don't get the Monday 5 newsletter, you can sign up on our website. There's always a new episode out every Monday where Jeff just talks about 5 different things going on in our community to be aware of, as well as links to all things going on in our Lakeside family and community and all that. But I'm on a tangent now. Let me get to the 4th thing, and this is maybe the most. There is no scandal that can out-scandal God's scandalous grace. I love that. We're going to unpack that at the end, but just so good. I've never seen scandal so many times in one sentence. So big ups to you, Robyn, for just putting those together and just so masterfully saying that. Let's go to the questions that came in this week, and then we're going to start talking about them. Number 1. I kind of broke it down. Some of these questions were a bit long, but just so good we want to unpack them. So I broke it down into three kind of bite-sized chunks. So here's the first part of the question. In a perfect world where we all imitate Jesus and we're all at the same level of spiritual maturity, it would be much easier to turn the other cheek or to take the high road. But they say, and then they kind of explain, like, the world is a messy place. Like, following Jesus isn't that easy. Christ followers, if we followed this, would bow out of a situation where they feel they're being wronged, would actually look weak to the world and maybe to other Christians. So like, does this still apply today? And then they give kind of two really great examples. What about if a fellow Christian business partner or family member is skimming or engaged in unethical practices and their behavior impairs their ability to pay your bills or adequately provide for your family? Do you think Paul is telling us that Jesus would have us let it go? Great. And then they qualify it some more. I love the examples. So good. Getting real practical. And I wonder about Christian women whose Christian husbands leave them. Are these women not to sue for support from the deadbeat dads out there? Not my words, the words of our who wrote the question. So Robyn, why don't you start and just, 3 layers of questions. Have had it.
Okay. Well, that's a loaded question. It's a great question. So I'm glad there's 4 of us to unpack it. But I think there's 2 things that we probably should establish right out of the gate. One is that Scripture, the pages of Scripture, are dripping with justice. God's heart is for justice. So when we look at passages like this and when we unpack them, we always have to remember that it's not that God is against justice. He's just giving us guidance in how we go about it. But God's heart is for justice. And the other thing is that Scripture is not nearly as black and white as we'd like it to be, or as we pretend it is. And so I really believe that Scripture is much more about wisdom and discernment than it is about rules and formulas. And so with those sort of 2 foundational thoughts, I think Paul's point was, or what was irking him was, you've lost already. The fact that 2 followers of Jesus, 2 Christians, have gotten to this place where you're at each other's throats and you have to go outside the church to resolve this dispute means something's really rotten within your church already. So in other words, back up from here and try and figure out what's going on over here and how to resolve that. Civil disputes in his mind should have been resolved within the church. And I think for the most part they can be, but it requires 2 things. 2 things that kind of rub us the wrong way, even Christians today in our Western world. And one is that we have to create in our churches a culture of accountability, grace-infused, love-informed accountability. And then the second is that we have to create a culture, we have to practice a culture ourselves as Jesus followers of humility and submission. So when you're part of a church, you're part of an alternative society. You're not just going there for the music every week. That you've committed that these are your peeps. You are walking with each other. Iron sharpens iron. You are going to hold each other accountable in love and grace. And I think when those 2 things are present, a culture of accountability within the church and a culture of humility and submission within the church, much of this could be resolved. And again, we're not talking criminal, right? Like criminal is a different category altogether. But generally, the church hasn't done this well. We've either not done it at all, or we've been way too heavy-handed with it. Deadbeat dads, man, they got to pay up. And you would hope that if that deadbeat dad's within a church and he's got friends within the church, the friends are going, dude, like you need to do the right thing. He may not listen to them, in which case then we have a law that says you can't get away with this. So yeah, I think I'm very grateful for our legal system, our judicial system, and it's there when we need it. But the hope and Paul's aspiration was, hey, you're an alternative society. You should be able to deal with this stuff, at least the civil stuff within the church. And, just kind of lastly on that, when we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus didn't stand up for himself, but he was always standing up for the justice of others. He was advocating for the justice of others. So I think if we're all within the church advocating for justice for each other, at some point, all of us are being covered by someone else looking out for us. So, the deadbeat dad and the mom who doesn't get the money, someone's looking out for her, someone's advocating on her behalf. And that's what Paul was really trying to drive home. People resemble Jesus.
I love that, Robyn. And Jeff, you want to jump in as well as to just how nuanced this is, and it's not this. I love, Robyn, what you said. It's like we're looking for this rule in Scripture or black and white in every situation. Do this, but Jeff, maybe just dig deeper into that idea of it maybe not being so black and white.
Well, the question asker highlighted a couple of scenarios, and he or she probably could have added 10 more. I could add 10 more. You could all add 10. Just every situation seems to be unique and different. And Robyn, when you mentioned the alternative society, when I first heard you say that on Sunday in your message, that really rang a chord with me, that's what we are part of, is an alternative society. And I was reminded of one of Jesus' most famous messages that he gave. It's often called the Sermon on the Mount. You can find it in Matthew chapter 5, approximately. And these are the statements that Jesus made that a lot of people will point to in a conversation like this, where Jesus said, when someone says, go 1 mile, go the other mile. When someone says, when someone slaps you on the one cheek, turn the other cheek also. Yeah, good, Daniel. People remember those statements that Jesus made. But really, the way I take the Beatitudes sermon, the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gave, is he was setting out in its original context, talking to an audience of Jewish people who were breaking from the old and breaking into the new. That's why he started many of his statements with, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And you can go back in the Old Covenant and you can look to where that exact reference is that Jesus was pointing to. And he was saying, but I say, when someone slaps you on the one side of the cheek, turn to the other side. When someone asks for your cloak, give them your jacket as well. Or I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that kind of idea. I think what Jesus was signaling is, we are this alternative society. I've come to bring something entirely new and different to your frame of reference. And it's much like what, Robyn, you were just saying, that it isn't a rule book that when you're faced with an ugly divorce and someone who won't pay spousal support, or when you're faced with a business partnership breaking up, here's what you do. That's really not what we use the Bible for, to proof text our response to different situations. That every situation requires a nuanced response. What about this one? And even in two different business partnership breakups, we might say in one situation, one response is called for, and in another one, another response is called for. And that does require that kind of wisdom, discernment, wrestling, and exercise of judgment. Not an easy thing.
And I think to be done in community, right? We wrestle with that in community. The story that I gave in the sermon about the two friends, our church didn't even have a culture for that. Like, it wasn't even on anybody's radar. Oh, let's take this to the elders, or let's take this to a trusted group within the church. We didn't have a culture for it. The obvious thing was to go to court. Was it right? Was it wrong? You decide.
Yeah.
When you were saying that story, Robyn, one thing you left out, and I was kind of wondering, it's like, I wonder how that one actually turned out. But anyway, you went on. You don't have to answer that now.
Nobody
won, but it's winning, losing.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that stood out to me about this question actually was when the question asker, they asked, would being wrong to look weak to the world? And I find that quite interesting, actually, because we live in a world, at least, the world I've grown up and lived in, is that you need to look strong, you need to look smart, you need to look fast, and all these sort of things. The better you look, the better the world is. Yet, as Jesus followers, we claim to follow someone who pursued weakness on a cross, who pursued death on our behalf. And I find that so interesting, because there seems to be this sense of power in weakness, this way in which humility triumphs over pride. And I find that quite an interesting way to approach these sort of topics when we come into these disputes and arguments with others and we think, am I going to come out on top? I think we're coming at it with the wrong perspective, but rather, am I coming out really pursuing an honor for the other person, and love and engagement for all involved, and justice is a part of that. But I really love, again, the way you said, basically, is that Jesus followers resemble Jesus, or we look like Jesus. And looking like Jesus is I think, taking on an apparel of surrender and sacrifice and humility. And so looking weak to the world, I don't think that needs to be our primary concern, or any concern really at all, but rather we shouldn't really actually care what the world perceives about our level of power or strength in this time, but rather try to give sacrificial love to those around us and really point to the ultimate power, which we believe is Jesus.
I love that way you summarize that, Daniel, in the sense of like, yeah, is that actually something, an image that we should be worried about? Here's a thought that just came to me as we were talking. Maybe one of the grids that I love what one author said. He said it's simpler and so much harder. He says it's the Jesus way. He's like, one new commandment I give you, right? It was all about love. And the author kind of distilled it to say, what if we simply ask ourselves this question: what does love require of me? And as Robyn said, what if we discern that in community? Then it's not about, do I take them to court? Do I turn the other cheek? But it's actually, what does love require of me? And so in that sense, when you're asking the question of, do I go after this person in court for child support? It's like, well, what does love require of me? Do I take care of these young children and the needs that they're going to have? Yes. Yeah. Court is probably a great choice. Or are you doing it? No, I have enough money. I'm just in it for more, because then I can really, right? Like, to ask the heart question of, why am I really doing this? Because my one lens that I should be looking at is, what does love require of me? Because that's the new standard that Jesus brought in, which really, it leaves nothing to hide in the shadows. You have to be gut level honest about it. Jeff, go ahead.
Marc, yeah, just one further follow-up to that. If someone listening today, if you're a Jesus follower and you've actually had the experience of going to court, things broke down so badly that you got to that place where you and your former spouse had to go to court, or you and your former business partner, you and your employer had to go to court over something, and you've got a lot of pain over that. I can imagine. I can't relate to you specifically on that because I've never been in that situation. But if you've been in that situation, you might be finding yourself saying, oh, gee, I don't know if I did the right thing, and it was ugly when we were in there. I think something that Robyn said earlier is, when you get that far, you've kind of lost already. And so this is kind of sounds like bad news, but I'm going to bring it back. It is a kind of a symbol, or it signals the breakdown and the brokenness that's in our culture and in human relationships. But if that's you that's gotten to there, I don't think that you should walk around with a sense of shame over yourself that I've really walked away from my faith and done the wrong thing because I ended up in court. The situation might have demanded that that was the right thing for you to have done in that situation, and you're okay.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for that. So good. Well, let's jump to our next question. And it was similar to the previous one. It was basically just, if I could distill what they said in this first part of the question, was like, so then does anyone get held accountable if all we do is turn our cheeks, and not fight back? Is there any accountability for anyone? And I would just say that's a fantastic one. Jeff covered it a little bit in last week's message, and then we unpacked it even more in the roundtable. So I would just point you in that direction. But then there were some follow-up parts of your question that I just want to go after, because they were just fresh and we haven't covered them yet, which is, okay, also, this is what the person says, what about Jesus wanting people to self-care or take care of themselves and to not be repetitively victimized? Okay, so before we even answer that question, let me just qualify the fact that some of you don't even agree with that question, right? You're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Jesus isn't about self-care, right? Maybe you grew up in a religious home where it's like, Jesus died on the cross and you better too, right? It is all about self-sacrifice and give and give and give. And if you're tired, it's okay. He went to the cross. Keep going. I don't know if anyone else grew up. Maybe I'm just speaking from my childhood. Okay.
You remember that line? I don't know if you know the line. It's better to burn out than rust out. Did you ever hear that? Burn out, man.
Did we grow up in the same place, Robyn?
That old.
But I think one of the interesting things is that self-care, and I think all four of us would agree with this, is self-care is so incredibly important, and it's intrinsic to Jesus following. To not care for self is to not care for a part of God's creation. When Jesus says, love others as you love yourself, like there's an intrinsic command there to actually care for yourself and love them. Otherwise, you can't love people very well if you're doing it the way you love yourself and you run yourself ragged. There's a hidden command in there to actually care for and love yourself. There is worth and value in you as others, so that is an okay thing. And so we actually, maybe you grew up in a church where it's like, no, like taking care of yourself, talking about your feelings, seeing a counselor, all those, that was just irrelevant. It was all about serving Jesus. And I just need to call it the fact that self-care is part of our Jesus following way. So with that said, what about people who are repetitively victimized? Do they have a choice in the matter, or should they just keep turning the other cheek, Jeffrey?
Well, that's a really, really good question. Again, another one I was going to have a headache for and not be available for today, but seeing as I'm here, I'll take a stab at it. I love that you brought that concept of love others as you love yourself as a bit of the example of Jesus in self-care, because I was going to say I didn't really have a scriptural basis for this, but you just gave me one. So thank you for that. But here's what I want to say about that. There are times when erecting a boundary between you and another person, a person that's toxic and unsafe, to use your words, question asker, a person who has victimized you, there are situations where you need to erect a boundary between you and that other person. What does a boundary look like? People throw that language around quite a bit. They'll quote the book Boundaries that's out there that you can read. But for you, a boundary might look like, I can't be alone with this person in the same room. If I'm going to be in the place where this other person is, I need to make sure somebody else is there with me. I can't agree to meet them alone. It might mean that I can't talk to them at all for a time. It might mean that I can't have this person around my children because they're unsafe to our family. It might mean other things. It might mean that you are going to have to leave your present employment because you just can't be around your current employer. There could probably be lots of other examples, but I think, again, that's another one of those things that if that's you, if you've been in that situation, you might kind of feel like, have I shown weakness by doing that? Have I abandoned the Jesus way? And I think in this vibe of self-care that we're talking about, erecting a boundary might be a very important thing for you. And if you say to yourself, wow, I just don't even know if I have the strength to do that, you might need to call out and ask for some help around that. There are people, whether they are professional counselors in your midst that you could call on, or a wise friend, one of your pastors that you might call on and said, I think I need to do that, but I don't know how. Wow. So go ahead and reach out for some help.
You know, I'm reminded actually in John chapter 8, you know, Jesus getting in a bit of a debate with some people, and it says, so they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. And I find it so interesting that Jesus could have, you know, called down whatever he wanted from heaven to just smite them or whatever picture you have of what Jesus could have done. But he's like, yeah, I'm just going to avoid this. I'm going to remove myself from this dangerous situation. And I think it's so cool that he did that.
Well, isn't that interesting that in that time, Jesus fled the beating. He didn't take up his own words, which are turn the other cheek in that, right? He could have just been like, okay, all right, you got another rock for me? Okay, come on, guys, I'll take another one, right? Like, he doesn't just lay back and take the beating. So it just continues to highlight, this isn't some black and white. Anytime you get hit, you just turn the other cheek and take another one. It's Jesus orchestrating and telling people, like, I'm starting something new where winning is losing, losing is winning. But Jesus also, and you'll find that theme that Daniel just highlighted all throughout Jesus's life, moving away from toxic people. Jesus did regularly. He talked about, don't throw your pearls to pigs. Don't use what is valuable on people who will not value it and who will continue to victimize and abuse you and use you. So I think the life of Jesus is actually a powerful narrative to make that point. We're looking for a verse where he said something, but sometimes if you want to know what Jesus meant by what he said, look at what he did. And Jesus often didn't tolerate toxic people. So let's go to the next question. That was fun. Here's one. How can our church and us as individuals be different than other Canadians in 2020? So really specific. How do we as Jesus followers stand out or are different? But not only that, but in Canada and in 2020. And 2020 is going to be the COVID-19 year. Like, this is going down in history. And so how will we be different? And as I was kind of thinking about this question, I don't know if you guys grew up, Robyn, you probably sang this song, right? But do you remember that, like, that song, right? They will know we are Christians by our love. But yeah, with the little, thank you. And I don't know if you guys had this thought ever come to your mind, but I'm like, there's a lot of loving people around. And I think, okay, so here's the question and then we'll get into it, but like, is it possible that when Jesus told his disciples, they'll know you're my followers by your love, that applied to them then, but not to us as Jesus followers today? Okay, hang on. Let me unpack that because that sounds
Whoa.
like
Whoa.
What are you saying? Okay, here's my thought. When Jesus said that, he was speaking to his disciples who were living in a Roman world where the ideas and ideals of Jesus were radical: to live generously, graciously, to fight for justice, to fight for widows and orphans. That literally was a 180 against the Roman culture because it was not a Jesus-based culture. But Canadians and even North Americans live in a society that was based, and its founding was based very much on a Christian worldview. And a lot of those values are actually now, and even though we're what you might call post-Christian, most of our society isn't Christian anymore, but we're not unchristian. We've moved past it. There's still a shadow of the Jesus way in our culture, in our values. I mean, goodness, this isn't the same in every country, but in our country, you get a tax benefit for being generous towards a charity. That's a Jesus thing. You don't find that everywhere, right? So in that way, I remember a friend of mine, when we were teenagers, we're talking about how to, share Jesus with the world. And we're talking about this, like, well, they'll know you're a Christian by your love. And she's like, honestly, I have friends and they aren't Christians and we have the same morals and the same values, and I don't stand out at all. So let me put that as a preface to say, do you think we can stand out with our love in 2020? And if so, how? And if not, what will stand out as Christians?
What a great question. Who's answering that one?
Daniel.
I think, yeah, sure. Well, yes, I think you still need to love. Like, love, just because other people around you are loving doesn't mean you're like, oh, well, they got the love thing down, so I'm going to get the being a jerk thing down. Maybe that'll cause me to stand out. But no, like, we still live a life out of love. And as you said, we live in a world in the Western culture that has been shaped by the church and the centuries of Christian influence. And so, yes, we live out of love, but I think there's also this unique ability we have, which is being present with God, having God's presence with us, his ability to love through us, his spirit within us. And so I think that in 2020 in Canada, in a world that is, in my mind, moving away from God as a guiding factor to life and more towards the self, more towards systems, and some of which we're discovering are broken. I think that as Jesus followers, as we seek to listen to the voice of God in our life, allow his leading in our life, we will love in ways that we haven't loved before, but the world hasn't seen before. And so one of these ways I think that is really powerful is, especially in 2020 in Canada, is not living out of a spirit of fear, but out of a spirit of love, a spirit of power and self-control, and out of the love that Christ has given us, and the way in which we can live through that. And so I think if we if we desire to love people guided by the Spirit and guided by the truth that he gives us, it will be different. We won't just be, coming up with good ideas on our own, or loving other people in order to look good, and those sort of ulterior motives we can often have sometimes, but we'll be loving out of his presence within us. And I believe that that'll give us something that should spark a difference around us.
Robyn,
Yeah,
Jen, any other
really
thoughts
good
on
question. I love that. I love that idea of fearlessness, that we, even if you are a Christian and you are fearful, or you're not a follower of Jesus and you're catching this podcast today and you are fearful, that our faith holds out the hope that we follow someone who gives us a reason to overcome our fear. And that really is the other thing. I guess it's not us that we proclaim. We're not kind of saying, I'm the shining example. We are saying, follow the one that we follow. Follow our risen Savior, who not only predicted, but actually pulled off his own death and resurrection. So that's a compelling thought, that's one of the COVID realities that Christians can be known for, is people who live fearlessly in the midst of an unprecedented situation in 2020.
And I think the last thing that comes to mind is the idea that as Jesus followers, like it is trendy in our culture to be generous, to be gracious, to seek justice, and to fight for people who have lost their rights to injustices. Where it takes an extreme element is the Jesus calling to love our enemies. Our culture values being charitable towards people who maybe have been wronged and who don't deserve the plight that they're in. Jesus comes to us when we're broken and we're not wanting to change, and extends grace. And I wonder if the loving our enemies is a unique thing about the Jesus, not to say other people can't, but in the sense of we cannot give what we haven't received. And as people who have received tremendous grace from God, to channel that, we receive that love through the Spirit and to give it away. I wonder if, living in response to the Spirit in our generosity is a thing that we have to offer the world that will be a breath of fresh air that goes beyond just, hey, what's a good, generous thing to do, but actually is like, no, I sense the Spirit of God telling me to do this, and that's a taste of heaven in that moment, and I want to do that better. It's easy to just go back to I give this amount to that charity, and I try and check in on my neighbors, but to check in every day with the Spirit, that is, I think, a gift that our world is hungry for. So with that said, let's just end with two thoughts. Number one, if this conversation, this roundtable conversation has been intriguing to you, can I just ask you, maybe send it to a friend and invite them to a Zoom coffee date after? And we're hoping that by no means, and some of you were like, no, clearly by no means have you answered every question or landed every tension. And maybe that's a little bit intentional, because we think that as Jesus followers, we're called to wrestle through this together. So I just encourage you, would you just find a friend, a family member who you can either listen to this with or encourage to listen, and then pick up the conversation, say, I'm not sure about this. And then wherever you land, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email, shoot us a message on social, and we'd love to dialogue about past things we've said. And you said, hey, you guys said this, but what about this? We're game. Bring it on. We find that fun. So we'd love that. But before we go, I would just so love, Robyn, you said something in your message that just gripped me. I already said it once, but let me just say it again. There's no scandal that can out-scandal God's scandalous grace. And I think there are some people maybe right now that need to hear that and need to be prayed over in that area. So would you just, whatever you sense God leading you to, maybe you pray for them. Would you just do that for the people in our audience who are listening right now?
I'd love to. Jesus, we just thank you for that truth. That is great news. We live in a broken and screwed up world. We screw up our own lives. We are victimized by others. And God, there are times when it looks like our lives, there's nothing left. There's no good thing. How do we start over? And to know that you are a resurrection God, that you are a redeeming God, that your grace just knows no bounds, that there's nothing we have done or can do that is beyond your grace and your forgiveness. So Jesus, for those listening today who are wounded, who feel shame, who have been victimized, Jesus, I just pray that you pour out your Spirit on them. Would you just have them know that they are so loved, and that there is a future, there is a resurrection for their life, there is redemption, and there's a brand new story for their life about to be born. Thank you, Jesus, for that scandalous grace. We love you, and we thank you in your mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Robyn. And if anything that Robyn even just prayed over you right now just resonated so deeply with you, feel free to reach out to us or any of the pastors from Lakeside. We'd love to just journey with you or to continue praying over you. But until next week, have a fantastic week, and thanks for tuning in to the Roundtable. Bye, friends.
Bye-bye.